Good afternoon, good morning, good noon, depending wherever you are. I'm happy to open this webinar on Iran at War, Aspects of Continuity and Change and Continuity. My name is Meir Litvak, and I'm the director of the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies. These are not simple times. These are difficult times for everyone. The Iran-Israel war, the continued war in Gaza. But part of our academic mission is to pursue knowledge and understanding of the situation of the world where we live in, and therefore, even though it is these are not easy times, we thought that a webinar was important. One small technical announcement. Professor Abbas Milani, who was supposed to speak today, will not speak today. He will speak tomorrow because of emergency medical situation, which means that we will have a little bit more time for each speaker today, and tomorrow it will be different. So without further ado, we'll start with the first speaker is Professor Shaul Chorev. Let me just say that Professor Chorev has been not only a former Brigadier General in the Israeli Navy, but also the Director General of the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission. And right now he's a professor at Haifa University, and he will speak about the Iranian nuclear threat, challenges, and potential remedies. Shaul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meir. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here. In the Navy, there are no brigadier generals, there are admirals. I was a rear admiral in the Israeli Navy, and currently I'm in the Institute for Maritime Policy and Strategy in Haifa, belonging to the Center of Blue Economy and Innovation. I have to speak about the Iranian nuclear threat, challenges, and potential remedies. And I'll concentrate on what is the Iranian statehood about the nuclear program, what is Iran's ambitions for nuclear program, what was wrong, if it was wrong, with the 2015 Iran and P5+1, what we call the GCPOA, how close Iran was to the nuclear device, and then I think, and this is the main part of my presentation, is reflections and conclusion. First of all, people have to understand that the Iranian statehood about the nuclear program is not belong only to the current regime. And due to its Persian heritage, Iran always believes that it has a significant international influence, and Iran views itself as entitled to develop into full industrialized nation rather than merely being an oil-producing country. You know, Iran has a lot of oil reservoir, and the nuclear program is seen as a symbol of power, and it also serves as a symbol of national prestige among the public. So when we are speaking about the nuclear program and Iran's statehood, it's not belong only to this regime. It started in 1967 when the Shah joined the American Atom for Peace initiative. They got the TRR, what is known as the Tehran Research Reactor, in the initiative Atom for Peace, and Iran signed the NPT and established in 47 the Atomic Energy Commission of Iran until 1979, very ambitious program of establishing 20 nuclear power plants, establishment of an enrichment facility, establishment of a separation facility. And when the Ayatollah regime come to power, they stop it. And only in 1984, they resumed this program because they consider the nuclear program that it's not appropriate for their, let's say, envision and their what is their ideology. Anyway, Iran proceed and in 1987 buys the P1 centrifuge blueprint from the AQ Khan, and we know what are the proceeding of it. So what I'm trying to mention here about Iran statehood is that Iran ambitions for nuclear program was not belong only to this regime, it belonged to the Iran statehood, and they identified it with Iran as a scientific countries, as industrial countries, and so on and so on. Then I would like to proceed with what was wrong with the JCPOA. To my knowledge, this JCPOA was quite a good agreement between Iran and the P5+1. And it have various stages. The first one for 10 years, dealing with 5,060 centrifuge in Ataz, but allowing only 1,044 IR2 to enrich, and the quantity was not more than 200 kilogram of 367%. It is for 15 years and then 20 years, and what I think is the most important one, and people are ignore it, is that they are signed the additional protocol of the IAA, which is not only a quantitative safeguard agreement, but also a qualitative safeguard agreement. So if the West or the P5+1, it was not the West, and that was what is important, that the US recruit also Russia and China to this agreement. They seem that Iran is 2 to 3 months for getting a nuclear weapon. It's ensured that they will stay with such a position for 2 years, and they blocked all the 4 paths to nuclear weapon, namely the enrichment and the other things. So what I would like to mention here that speaking about the JCPOA, they have a loopholes in this. And at this situation, I was the head of the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, and I tried to pursue the IAEA the director that they have to deal with the open issue that was not answered by Iran. But and another loophole was about the ballistic missile, because this agreement was or dealt only with the ballistic missile that are carrying as a delivery system a nuclear warhead, and not dealing with the ballistic missile as a threat by itself. So speaking about it, it limited itself to the nuclear program of Iran, stop or block all these paths to the nuclear weapon till in 2018, when our prime minister asked Donald Trump or pursue him to draw from the deal. And when he drew from the deal, it was unilateral, and I think that Iran took its also path and start to accelerate its nuclear program. So when speaking about the current situation, and that's what people sometimes are wrong, there are, or also our prime minister mentioned that they are in the 90 minutes before having a nuclear weapon. It's not right. Iran, with the 60% of enriched uranium, have a quantity sufficient to 9, 10 nuclear warhead, but they have to enrich to 90% and not to ignore the next step, which is to convert it to a metal uranium and to build this weapon with the metal uranium. So speaking about it, I'm not exposed to all the intelligence, but I think that speaking about how close, they were close when you're speaking about enrichment. And that's right, 2 to 3 weeks, they can reach the 90%, but there are other stages to fulfill in order to reach a weapon state. So this is the situation. After what happened in the last 2 weeks, and I think that we are still in the event, and I think that people are still quarreling about this question whether US and Israel succeeded in not only to stop, but to demolish all the program by itself. And I'm sure that we have to come to some conclusion and reflection that nuclear Iran will change the geopolitical situation in the Middle East and pose an existential threat to Israel. This is, I think, very trivial, and we know it. I don't think that the withdrawal of the Trump administration from the JCPOA, encouraged by Israel, got the results that they think by sanctions. And when we are speaking about the last campaign, namely the Rising Lion and the UN strike on Iran nuclear facility, they have a significant damage on Iran nuclear program. No question about delaying its progress by several years, but the question is whether Iran will stop its ambition to have some kind of nuclear facilities. And this is the big question, because when speaking about zero enrichment, I'm not sure that the Iranian will accept it. Concerning the Ayatollah regime, I don't think that currently there is some kind of chance to change in the regime. And Iran and US negotiate to restore the nuclear deal, but I think on different terms. What is coming to be a good consequence is that when and if the US will use it, UK, France, and Germany should support the negotiation by persuading the Iranian side to firmly guarantee that it will use its nuclear program solely for civilian purposes. And one additional comment is with the safeguard of the IAEA. And it should be given, or IAEA should be given a very intrusive safeguard to Iranian program if the US will accept Iranian requirement to have some kind of enrichment, because I think that the Iranian, with a covert program, they are expert how to do it. Open issue in the region is when the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia intends to build nuclear power plants and independent nuclear power cycle, which raise question about proliferation and may be considered as a gold standard in the region, how Trump administration will approach it. When they are speaking business and the KSA, they are very serious with their ambition to have an independent nuclear fuel cycle. I don't think that they will compromise on it. Last but not least, long-range missile and attack drone, they are central to Iran's threat posture, and ignoring them again puts the US negotiators at risk, concluding a flawed agreement that removes the threat posed by high-enriched uranium production, but enables Tehran to expand and advance dangerous delivery system, which it has proven more than willing to use and proliferate in recent years. And without missile limits and a new JCPOA, we'll have the same major flaws as in the past one. And now it is time to close the missile loopholes in a secure and more comprehensive deal, which could open the way for meaningful regional dialogue in the future. And not leaving the question of any agreement, because Iran can have a covert program, should include a snapback mechanism. So with this, I conclude my address. I try to mention why nuclear program is not only in the Ayatollah regime, but it is Iran's statehood. I try to mention what was wrong in the JCPOA. I try to mention what are the loopholes. I try to have some kind of reflection after the campaign that we in the US have. And I try to mention also additional items that should be negotiated, that because we saw what were the devastating results operating them against cities, civilian population in Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this deep and comprehensive analysis. Our second speaker will be Professor David Menashri, the founder of the Alliance Center, and its first head, and he will speak about Iran challenges from within. So, David, please. David, unmute.
This webinar is co-sponsored with the Pugwash organization that it's many people, I think most people here know. And we will have Professor Neuneck will be speaking tomorrow also about the nuclear challenge. And we'll speak more about it tomorrow, but I want to mention it because we are collaborating with Pugwash for a long time, and some of the people who are here remember it in the peak years of relations between Israel and Pugwash, and the lack of relations between us and the Soviet Union when Pugwash was so instrumental in bringing parties together to speak. And just mention that 30 years ago, Pugwash won the Nobel Prize for Peace, and they continue with their efforts. Now about the challenges that Iran is faced with. The division of labor between me and Professor Litvak is that I will say that the challenges the regime has, and I think that the response will come tomorrow when Meir speaks about the regime, resilience of the regime. You know, for 46 years, we are discussing Iran. I think every day it's on the agenda. And for some reason, I don't think we know enough about this regime and about what they are standing for and their policy and their ambitions. Thinking about it, I always remember what Churchill said in 1939, speaking about the Soviet Union. It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. So that's Churchill's way to describe this enigma. And I think that we're still in this enigma. But he said that he has a key to understand Soviet Union. And the key, he said, is national interest. And I think that we speak about Iran, we can see also the enigma and also the interest that people are usually speaking about Islamic regime as an ideological, stubborn regime, but don't look at the other side, which is their interest. Now, the problem with Iran is that we speak about interest. It is not clear what is the interest. Is it the interest of Islam? Is it the interest of Iran? Is it the interest of the ruling elite, or is the interest of the supreme leader? And I try to say a few words about this later. Before I want to, and I picked up to speak about points that people are, I think, they're not sufficiently aware. To see about the conflicting identities in Iranian heritage and legacy. And I think that looking back throughout Iranian history, we can see that the Iranian legacy is based on three pillars. One is ancient imperial monarchical Persian. The other is Islamic, later on Shiite. And the third that has been entrenched over the past 2 centuries is Western. And many people ask me, do you really think that West is part of the Iranian history? Can you go back to Iran can go back to the East, West? I don't know if Iran can go back to the West, but they cannot take the West out of Iran anymore. in the last 150 years. Let's just realize they have the revolution and they establish Islamic Republic. Their education system is based on the curriculum of American universities. And wherever you go, and the young people of Iran are very close to American culture. Some of them, unfortunately, are in jail. So these triangular identities with their conflicts is problematic, because Iran the politics in Iran is a zero-sum game. Adherence to one identity cannot combine with advocates of other groups. And I here quote Professor Saril Ghalam from the National University of Iran, said their basic definitions are at odds. So the Shah tried to take Iran all the way back to the imperial, to the legacy of Cyrus the Great and the Persian culture, and also to Western technology and not culture, but at least systems. I would say that he was trying to take Iran into the legacy of Cyrus the Great. Ayatollah Khomeini was trying to get Iran into the legacy of Imam Hussein. He's a cherished Imam of Shiite Islam, and I believe that you will hear more about him on Saturday, when is the Ashura, this holy religious, the most important Shiite date of the massacre of the family of Imam Ali in Karbala in the year 680. The Shah was not able to take Iran, or to take the church or the mosques out of Iran, or to cut the significance, importance of Islam in Iranian society. But at the same time, Khomeini did not manage to take the heritage of the monarchy of imperial Iran out of Iran. And the third of them is the Western culture. And I think that both of them, the Shah adored the Western culture, the Islamic regime does not, but it still has to allow room for Western civilization in their policies and their attitudes. It's not only death to America, but there is also some people who call long live America. The three of them, the three legacies, heritage, cannot be ignored. Their weight cannot be ignored in their influence in Iranian policymaking. But the problem is that each of them has its turn. The definition of policy is based on the people who are in control at the same time. The Shah was taking the Iran one side, the Khomeini to the other side, to future I don't know what. The last 46 years are the years of the clerics, and it has to do also with the regional policy. The Shah thought that Iran is the center of the universe. The Shah behaved like Iran is the first imperial, the first empire in history of mankind, and it was. The Ayatollah Khomeini and his people think about Iran also as center of the universe. They don't call it the center of the universe, they call it the center of Islam. And there is this philosophy of Iran being al-Qura. al-Qura is the mother of all towns, the central city of Islam. And by this logic, whoever is al-Qura, whoever is the recognized leaders of the Muslim world, and for them the Muslim world is the world, whoever is there, all Muslims must be loyal to them and come to their help in time of need. It didn't happen this time. Not only did all Muslims like Egypt or Saudi Arabia did not come, even their proxies didn't come to their help. Now, there is also a question of ideology and interest. This Islamic regime, no matter how radical they are not blind to the need to be more pragmatic. Khomeini bought arms from Israel during the war between Iran and Iraq. Khomeini signed an agreement with Saddam Hussein to end the war of 8 years, and he made statement at that time appealing to the people, it is sweeter for me to drink poison than sign an agreement with Saddam Hussein, but we don't have a choice. Ayatollah Khamenei went to the JCPOA and he said, he called it heroic flexibility. You must be flexible. When Khomeini said that he's willing to drink the poison, he did it twice. He issued a fatwa, religious decree, in which he said that in the sake of interest, it is necessary, the Islamic regime can even destroy a mosque and suspend the 5 major elements in Islamic faith. This is something that you don't expect supreme religious authority to say, but he did. The question remains, what is interest? As I mentioned earlier, it is the interest of Islam. That's what Khomeini meant. It is the interest of the state. It is the interest of, but it gradually turned to be the interest of the supreme leader. The question also is, what is Islam? I'm sorry I'm asking this question because this question is being asked all the time. What is true Islam and who decides what is true Islam? And this was raised by Iranian students who say, you preach us to follow the true Islam, but would you kindly tell us how many Islams are there and who decides what is false and what is true? So why I mention it, because we don't live today according to what Islam used to be. We live here today by our interpretation of the past. And there I quote to you something that said Professor Abdul Karim Soroush. He lives now in the United States. And he was one of the revolutionaries. He was the head of the cultural revolution in Iran. And he said that we don't live today by our, we live today by our understanding of the principles of faith. But there is no one Islam. There is no one Islam that is better than the other. There is no final Islam, and there can be no official interpretation of Islam. Mainly, even the Islamic regime cannot tell you this is the only Islam. And now you understand why he lives in the United States. And there are also disagreements between all strata, not only between the people and the regime, between the clergy. When Khomeini came to power, there have been 8 grand ayatollahs in Iran. None of them supported Khomeini's philosophy. Today is the highest ranking ayatollah in Shiite Islam, Ayatollah Sistani, who is in Iraq, doesn't accept Khomeini's or Khamenei's philosophy. And between them we have to distinguish between theologian and, I would say, religious politicians. In Hebrew culture, I can say there's a difference between Rabbi Shach and Rabbi Gafni, Rabbi Ovadia and Rabbi Deri. There is the people who are theologian, but what happened in Iran is that the politicians, religious people, took the supremacy, and now they are, even Khamenei is not the high prominent Ayatollah. He was not even allowed to issue fatwa when he was chosen to be supreme leader. And there is difference between different sections in this Iranian politics, between more pragmatic, I would say even some of them are liberal, rational politicians, and some of the more principalists, they call themselves radicals, conservatives. And there is difference between the religious establishment and what I call the children of revolution. 46 years, the people who are now in their 50s, they have not been in kindergarten when the Shah was removed. So to come to this last question of Iranian, what I hear recently in Israel about toppling the regime, changing regime, this is something that I don't even like to hear. I don't feel that this is our responsibility to crown people in Iran, not even the crown prince of Iran. The revolution here that I have to stress was not about establishing Islamic regime. I lived in Iran for 2 years, and I say that my wife is also here in this webinar. We lived 2 years in Tehran, and I didn't sense, I've seen people speaking about the need for change, but it was not necessarily to return to Islam. The Islamic Revolution, like any other big revolution in history, be it the French or Russian or maybe even the Chinese, were based on 2 pillars about welfare and freedom. There is no greater freedom today in Iran that used to be under the Shah, and there is no better welfare for the poor people of Iran that used to be at that time. And here is why the people are so upset and angry. Now I also mentioned that Iran has tradition of toppling regimes. Iran has tradition of revolutions. Iran is one of the very few countries in the world that has 2 big revolutions in the 20th century. Iran is the only country in the Middle East which has constitutional revolution in 1906 and Islamic revolution in 1979. In between, they had 2 other huge movements, and since the revolution, you always see them in the streets. I put here some of the slogans they say to make it easier. Can you share it?
Yes, I will share it, but the video, I have just a couple more minutes. Just letting you know.
I'll end. I'll finish with it. So when you see these sentiments that I believe you could read, it shows how people are unhappy with the regime. But the question is, if this necessarily leads to change of regime. I heard about the toppling of the Islamic regime or the end of the Islamic regime. Don't laugh. I hear it the first time before the revolution. They even say that even if the regime will come to power, it will not last 6 months. And I remember always what Mark Twain said about that the reports of his death were premature. So I don't mean that there will be no change. I think that there is a change, there is by the people of Iran, but I think that mainly here in Israel, we should not speak about it all the time. We should let things happen. Revolutions don't have the good manner of ringing the bells of the church and denouncing, beware of July 14th. Bernard, this is for you. Here is this French Revolution or Russian Revolution or something other revolution. They erupt all of the sudden. And I can only quote the song that the Israelis know that says, all of the sudden, a nation wakes up and start moving. These revolutions begin all of the sudden, and I think that there is still much for this movement to prepare before it's marched on, but all the ingredients are there, but we cannot predict, and it's time that we scholars will understand that prediction is not our job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move now to the next speaker, which is our own colleague, Dr. Rachel Kantz Feder from the Alliance Center, and she will speak about Iran's cultural diplomacy and the Russian vision of the multipolar order. Rachel, please.
Okay, thank you, Meir. It's always a little challenging to speak after Professor David Menashri, but I'm happy that he touched on some points today about Iranian identity and Western culture. I'd like today to shed some light on an underexplored dimension of this recent Israel-Iran war. And this is the front that involves the transnational ideological battlefield. Now, I wish I had much more time to detail this, but over the past 20 years or so, and in particular since the 2009 elections in Iran, Iran has invested heavily in a strategy of cultural diplomacy designed to counter the so-called Western soft war, Jengi Narm, that is viewed to be being waged against Iran, against Iranian identity. This discourse, of course, this notion of soft war emerges from Joseph Nye's notion of soft power. So ironically, actually, we see that in Iranian political discourse, this idea of soft power and then soft war has taken root, and it neighbors other discursive tropes such as cultural onslaught and America and the West's psychological measures that are deployed to erode Iranian identity. Now, when I'm talking about cultural diplomacy today in this context, I'm referring to the intentional use of cultural exchange, be that media collaboration, arts, international conferences hosted in Iran, book fairs and whatnot. But this cultural exchange that's used to promote the Islamic Republic's ideological goals and its anti-American ideology. In Iran, we see that the use of cultural diplomacy, it's not merely a reaction to Western soft power, but it's evolved to be an articulation of an alternative global order rooted in an ideological and civilizational opposition to liberal Western modernity. Now, central to this development in Iranian discourse is the embrace of the idea of multipolarity. And this concept has really gained traction in Iranian political discourse through the reception and popularity of the Russian political philosopher Alexander Dugin. Now, Dugin's known as a controversial figure who's influenced far-right movements in Europe and now more recently in America as well. And he does so with his promotion of anti-globalism, traditionalism, and the multipolar order. He has quite a checkered past with membership previously in avowedly fascist and anti-Semitic movements, but he's risen to certain prominence in Russia, and he's believed to still hold influence among Putin and some other Russian elites. Dugin views Iran as a vital partner in his neo-Eurasian ideology, and he seeks a geopolitical and spiritual pact with Iran. He sees Iran as a civilizational ally against Western modernity and liberalism. He's become something of a fixture in Iranian media over the past 15 years or so. He's very well received in certain intellectual circles, among hardliners that view Iran and Russia as natural partners to lead an anti-American, anti-Western coalition. He has made tens and tens of visits to Iran over the years, even participating in Arbaeen procession. And since 2010 or so, he started to work with one of the chief strategists who's affiliated with the IRGC on a new horizon of cultural diplomacy initiatives. Now, again, I don't have time to really detail everything, but this involves many international conferences, international film festivals hosted in Iran over the years in collaboration with his own think tank. And we see that over the years, the composition of the participants in these conferences and festivals really reflects his own Dugan strategy, which is beyond left and right, but against the center. So we see through these conferences and efforts quite a broad array of different figures from ends of the political spectrum, from the far left to some of the most extreme right-wing movements and organizations. Over the years, these conferences and artistic collaborations have drawn, again, on quite a broad array of anti-imperialists, 9/11 truthers who deny 9/11 or come up with conspiracies over what happened there. Many different organizations that kind of fall under the far left, whether that be the Code Pink Party, the Green Party, the American Green Party, that is, Nation of Islam. We have individuals associated with the LaRouche movement, libertarians, white supremacists, Occupy Wall Street activists, who over the past 20 years have consistently come together and participated in these cultural diplomatic initiatives sponsored by Alexander Dugin and certain elements associated with the IRGC. And this activity is broad, and you can say that through this network, you see a lot of different ideological convergences that take place outside of these conferences, of course, and continue and take on a new life of their own in independent media ecosystems in Europe and in the United States. Now, since October 7th and through this recent war with Iran, we see this network, again, comprised, sometimes referred to as sort of a red-brown convergence. It's played quite an instrumental role in defining and defending Iran's position in independent media spaces. A lot of the tropes from Iranian anti-American ideology and this multipolar vision of Alexander Dugin, we see have made their way in to American right-wing media spaces. Iran has been cast as the reasonable counterweight to American militarism and Israeli expansionism. And of course, these views intersect with the far-right critiques we have in the United States among figures like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Glenn Greenwald. These are all figures who have, in the past couple of years, come to regularly platform Alexander Dugin and amplify his and the Iranian position on global affairs, be that the previous Syrian civil war, and of course now with events from October 7th and with this current war. So the Iranian regime, and specifically the IRGC's cultural and ideological apparatus, has really brought together quite a transnational network of influencers, academics, journalists, activists, former politicians. And this really, again, what's important here is that they really span the ideological spectrum here. So this network has quite successfully brought together voices from the far left and the far right under the banner of resistance to Zionism, liberalism, and Western hegemony. And again, since October 7th and through this current conflict, we've seen that these influencers and networks have really proven their utility in amplifying the regime's narrative in the global discourse. And what can be said here is that the Iranian investment in this strategy of cultural diplomacy in collaboration with Alexander Dugin and his vision of a multipolar order has really proven to be valuable. And just to conclude, I think that in an era in which not only missiles, but information shape these arenas, on this front, the regime actually has had quite a lot of success. And I think that regardless of how the future trajectory of Russian-Iranian relations develop, I think that we'll see this continued collaboration that has, again, I think proven to be over the past 2 years, especially very advantageous for Iran. Thank you. Meir, you're on mute, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Our next speaker is an old friend of our center, Professor Bernard Hourcade from the CNRS, who is a geographer, demographer, social scientist, and has done extensive research on Iran. And he will speak about the ethnic diversity and dynamics of the new socio-cultural and economic discrepancies in Iran. So Bernard, the floor is yours. Bernard may have technical problems because he's not speaking from a laptop, so be patient to modern technology.
Thank you, Meir. I think you hear me, I think. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this debate. When the situation is difficult, it is a time for scholars to discuss and to keep relations. So I would like to speak about Iranian society. Today's Iranian society and social political dynamics are poorly known in Iran. We don't know exactly what is happening in Iran inside the system. We often use old categories, old data inherited for the past, and we are using principle, paradigm, which are not exactly relevant with today's Iran, but based on history, on heritage. And of course, the policy of the Islamic Republic is guilty for that, since even for Iranian scholars, it is difficult to study the Iranian society. It is, of course, forbidden for foreigners to be in Iran, to work in Iran, for scholars, and to study exactly Iran. I think it is one of the big mistakes of Islamic Republic to be like that, unknown, and not exactly unknown, but wrongly known. I would like to strengthen some points to see in which way we have to rethink completely our way to see Iran. First, ethnicity and ethnic minorities. Speaking about Iran, especially in Israel, friends ask me, oh, what are exactly the situation of Shia, Sunni minorities, of the Kurds, the Baluch, against the Persian people? Of course, it's an important point. And the fact that Iran is a multi-ethnic country is a matter of fact. And being Kurd is not the same thing as being Mazandarani or Azeri or Baluch or Persian. That's very clear. But let us compare, for instance, the map of literacy in Iran in '86. It means at the end of the regime of the Shah. And I published that in Iran Carto, an atlas of Iran. In this map, we can see the center of Iran, the Persian-speaking population, having a high rate of literacy. And the surrounding areas of Iran, where the Kurds, the Baluch, the Turkmens, the Arabs, the Law, the Bakhtiari, and so on, and the Azeri, having a lower rate of literacy. And we think that, of course, the central of Iran is opposed to the periphery, and the minorities are opposed to the central of Iran. I think this map is no longer accurate. If we see the map of today's literacy in Iran, the color is the same. All the Iranians now can read and write, and they have got a high level of literacy, more or less 82% of the population, especially among the women population, female population, can read and write. That's a major revolution inside Iran. And if there was a revolt of Mahsa Amini and the female population 2 years ago, it was because of this cultural revolution done by Islamic Republic. And now this revolution is working against the Islamic Republic itself. So we have to see ethnicity completely different. Now today, the language spoken in Iran is not only Kurds or Baluch, but both Kurdish and Persian. People are bilingual in the minorities. That's different. And to be provocative a little bit, I can say that Mahsa Amini was not a Kurd. She was born in Kurdistan, but she was killed in Tehran. She was an ordinary lady, young female citizen, and exactly the same that we can find in Mashhad, in Ahvaz, in Tabriz, or in Yazd. And the culture of Mahsa Amini is very standard, is not Kurdish. Of course, it was taken by the Kurdish political movement. But if we compare Saqqez, the place where Mahsa Amini was born, 80% of the female population of Saqqez in 86 didn't speak Persian. 80%. Today, 95% of the female population of Saqqez is literate. Can you compare? What is important? The fact that they are Kurdish or the fact that they are literate and involved in the global culture of modern Iran? So we have to think about that and to notice that today Iran, because they all speak Persian, and the Islamic Republic is centralized, I mean, it's strong for repression and for political reasons, obviously. But it strengthened nationalism in Iran. Never Iran was so well united than today. And so we have to think different about, of course, the reality of being Kurd, Baluch, and so on and so forth. But we have to think basically that Iran has changed, and now basically Iran is much more united than it was before. Second point about urban, about cities and villages. Even the Statistical Center of Iran gives the data of the census opposing cities and villages, rural and urban. This dichotomy, the geographical dichotomy, I think is no longer relevant. Of course, today, 80% of the population is living in cities, and the population living in villages are quietly involved in the national events of the country. And they are involved in the urban culture more or less than the people living in cities. But we have to think about the fact that today, what has to be studied is the fact that in Iran, people are not living in the center of the old cities, but in the suburbs. In Tehran, 40% of the population of Greater Tehran is living in the suburbs of Tehran. There is not a single paper about Karaj, about Eslamshah, Rajshak, Varomin, Shahryar. All these former villages have got now 500,000 inhabitants. Karaj is the fourth largest city in Iran. And no studies have been done on these places. So if you want to understand today's social and political events in Iran, we have to see, of course, what are doing the Kurds and the Baluch and the Turkmen and so on and so forth. Much more important to see what are the people of central Tehran thinking and what is the behavior of the people in the suburbs. And the main dichotomy is not between Kurdistan and Persian people, but maybe between the people of Rajshak and Eslamshah and the people of Tehran. So that's a new, very important fact. Third point, level of education. As I've said, almost all the people of Iran now are literate. So they can have access to social media, to a lot of things. It's very important, a new revolution done by the Islamic Republic. But if you see at the unity, we have also to go deeper about literacy and to see exactly the level of scientific education people have, of the level of academic degree the people have. If you have got only the capacity to read and write, you can have access to social media and see how America is a good thing, how dirty are the mullahs and so on and so forth. And you can think about, they can dream about something else. But something different when you are educated much more, you can think about what is exactly, and I will be back to what David Menashri said a few minutes ago, about the fact Iran, is Islam, is also Western culture and scientific culture, much more able to think different. And so the level of education is much more important, in my opinion, than a traditional opposition between literate and illiterate. If we are looking at what happened in 2019, there was a riots and upheaval of the poor people of the suburbs of Tehran, of small cities of Iran, and no support from a westernized, very speaking English population of the cities center. In 2022, when Mahsa Amini events occurred, the people which have been severely, very, but the repression against these people were very tough. About 1,000 people have been killed within 3 days in the riots of the people, the poor people of Iran. There was no junction between the Mahsa Amini's movement and the social poor movement of the population. This social cultural gap is very important between those who have higher education and those who have not higher education. That's the main point. So we have to see, of course, the explanation of that. Because of repression, the regime is strong and very tough, that's clear. But you have to think also to go deeper in the social knowledge of Iran to see why the suburbs, the people of Islam Shah, didn't join the movement of Mahsa Amini, and why in Mahsa Amini's movement nobody was in Islam Shah. So that's the main point. So to conclude, I think we have in this way to think completely about the Iranian history and Iranian facts, especially, for instance, about what happened during the last 2 years about imperialism. We said Iran is an imperialist country. Of course, Iran was imperialist in the time of Kurosh, but I've heard that Kurosh is dead. It was 2,500 before. And at that time, Iranians, the state of Iran, was never able to control outside territories. On the contrary, Iran lost Transcaucasia, Herat, Turkmenistan, a part of Iraq, and in part of the Persian Gulf. It was the contrary. And what happened after the dreams of being again back to Kurosh time, what the IRGC had, the Patron had, to be very strong with the Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Bashar, with the militias they had in Syria, in Iraq, this empire, this new Islamic revolutionary empire, fall down within 2 weeks. So Iranian is not able to be imperial. Iran is a nationalist country, center of its own national identities. So I think we have to think completely different about what happened. And I would like to conclude that when I'm speaking about Iran, I said my main enemy is Kurosh. People in Iran are dreaming about Iran as an old country, having an old culture with Zoroastrianism, with a great time of the empire, of the pre-Islamic empire. And it prevents us to see what are the dynamics inside Iran, which are quite important. What happened in Iran in the last 50 years it was the first post-Sovietic, post-communist revolution. It was also the first country having the tough experience of political Islam and what is the outcome today. So we have to think different and to avoid speaking about Iran, the mullahs, about reformists, Islamists, and so on. Of course, it exists. It's quite important to see that. But let us think different and to go back to the reality of the people of Iran. As far as I know, Kurosh is dead. Khomeini also is dead. But 92 million of Iranians are still alive. And I would like to conclude on this word. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Can I say a word here about Bernard's work? More than 20 years ago, he came to Israel in one of the meetings of Pugwash and Iranian studies in Tel Aviv. At that time, he wrote a book of maps of Tehran. He made me very popular in Israeli institutions. They were looking about information of maps of Iran, and he was the first, I think it's the first book of maps of Tehran, isn't it?
Yeah, I think all these books and maps are online now on Iran Carto or Cartorian, irancarto.cnrs.fr. You can find it very easily. I mean, 1,000 maps of Tehran, of Iran, and it is a way to go deeper in Iran with some answers and millions of questions.
And it was endorsed by President Ahmadinejad.
Yes, about terror. Yeah, my dear friend Ahmadinejad.
Thank you so much, Bernard, for this very enlightening talk. We move now to our next speaker, is Professor Götz Neuneck, who is a physicist from the University of Hamburg. It is also the head of the Pugwash Council, and he will speak about implications for the non-proliferation regime, potential to reconstitute its nuclear program, and Iran's potential to reconstitute its nuclear program. And Götz, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Meir, and I'm quite happy and moved to be invited to this webinar here. Congratulations to you and the Israeli Pugwash group to organize on short alert such a meeting. It seems to be necessary to have an exchange on the current situation. I'm also quite happy to see Pugwash friends like David, but also Shlomo, Arnold, and others who are for a long time quite active in organizing a fruitful exchange, and I'm happy if we can continue to do this. I'm a physicist, and I cannot resist to look what happened on the ground in the last weeks, well knowing that this falls into a highly intensive political situation, which I think you, as specialists from the region, might understand much better than I do. I think it's also important from the beginning to state that Pugwash for decades tried to help through track 2 diplomacy to address concerns about the Iranian nuclear activities. And I think we should be honest to ourselves, at the end we failed. I remember that Pugwash was quite successful the beginning of the 2000 years to organize meetings with Iranians. We had always also after these meetings in Israel, and we discussed at that time already the solution of the nuclear crisis by military means. And I was at that time, of course, as many others, younger, and very much relieved that this route, this path was not taken at that time. This has unfortunately changed, and I think it makes the situation much more complicated. We should also have and understand, we should also have in mind and understand that after the strikes of the Israeli and US forces, the Pugwash community is very much concerned about the future of the non-proliferation regime, the remaining nuclear and non-proliferation threat, and the stability in the Middle East. And I think only by coordinated efforts it is possible to prevent more violence here. On the other side, I must also say that beyond the illegality and the most deplorable loss of lives on both sides, I mean, Israel and Iranian sides, the key question is whether the nuclear threat by Iran is gone forever, or whether the program can be reconstituted after some time, causing even a more imminent threat beyond the NPT. There will be discussions whether Iran might leave the NPT. Of course, we should work to prevent exactly that, but it is now much harder. The military strikes have extremely complicated any diplomatic solution and put the non-proliferation regime again very much under stress. My and those of many others' opinion is that the strikes on nuclear sites will only delay but cannot prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, and likely to have the opposite effect. the Israeli decision to strike Iran militarily can at the end lead to an acceleration of its uranium enrichment and other activities in a less transparent manner that will be more difficult for IAEA to monitor or even to understand the program better. So let me allude to two questions. What is the damage on the ground known by the declared nuclear facilities in Iran, and what are the consequences for the non-proliferation regime? President Trump has claimed that the Iranian nuclear facilities have obliterated. There is no doubt that the strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program significantly and perhaps severely damaged the known enrichment program. This might be true for Natanz and Esfahan, but it is unclear for Fordow. Some agencies, such the US Defense Intelligence Agency, say the attacks have delayed the program only by a few months. Others say perhaps for a year, but certainly not forever. So one of the main conclusions is that we need diplomatic efforts first to understand that and to find solutions. I think there are three factors which underline this. And I'm happy to exchange with Mr. Shaul Chorev, who has much more insight in the IAEA. But these three factors are the extensive knowledge of how to build a nuclear weapon and core elements for a military nuclear program remain intact despite the killing of Iranian scientists. Such a program does not need extensive space. Such a military program does not need extensive space and very sophisticated laboratories and sophisticated production facilities. It can be also continue in a very small setting. This is about the knowledge which is there, okay? And this still is a problem. Second, it is unclear where the residual stocks of 60, 20, and 3 to 5% of high-enriched uranium exist, and where centrifuges manufacturers but not yet installed are located now. The main issues are the around 500 kilograms of 60% high-enriched uranium, which can be weaponized in months if a design exists. The material was most likely transported to other locations before the attacks. It is not known where the material is now. The residual material is sufficient for, already mentioned, for 9 to 10 crude explosive devices, which can indeed cause an imminent threat again. It is also unclear whether the underground production halls in Fordow have been damaged significantly. The IAEA said, or Mr. Grossi said in a Financial Times interview, that Fordow is much deeper than 80 meters. So it's not sure, and no one knows exactly what happened there. And the third point is it is unknown whether there are any other production facilities in the country. The AEIO officials several months ago announced that they consider to build new enrichment facilities in the country and certainly have accumulated much knowledge and perhaps already started. So one conclusion is that for further cooperation with IAEA is essential, necessary, even under the current war-like situation. If this fails, this could cause the opposite of what many hope for, namely stability, peace, and economical development in the region. The second point is the non-proliferation regime, where Israel is not a full member. Of course, it is important to follow the domestic discussion in Iran. And I rely here on the experts on Iran to have an ear on that on the ground. Here, the forces demanding Iran's withdrawal from the NPT will getting louder, no doubt about this. Hardliners wanted to push ahead with a domestic nuclear armament and could now prevail. They will argue that Iran has been attacked because they had no nuclear weapons. North Korea is a case which shows that it never faced such an attack because it is now a nuclear state. The risk that Iran is indeed now aggressively acquiring a nuclear arsenal is now higher than before the attack last week. Also agrees, and I quoted him, Robert Einhorn, an arms control expert from the Obama administration. If the nuclear crisis in Iran cannot be resolved diplomatically in a definite and sustainable way, confidence in the global non-proliferation system will also continue to wane, encouraging more states to consider the use and the acquiring of nuclear weapons to thwart attacks by other nuclear armed states. Some also argue, some voices can be heard also in some other countries, not only in your region, but also in South Korea, Germany, Poland, Iraq, Japan, and they are wondering whether they can rely on the nuclear US umbrella too. This is an additional debate which collides with the current situation. So the failure to resolve the long-term Iranian nuclear crisis will also further erode confidence in the global non-proliferation regime. This can encourage more states to consider the pursuit of building nuclear weapons to prevent attacks by other nuclear armed states, as I just mentioned. My last take on this: diplomatic solutions to strengthen the non-proliferation system in the region are urgently needed, and I'm sure Pugwash is happy to contribute to this. Iran is still a test case, and it is not too late to show that diplomatic solutions are possible, but this has now become even more complicated. Nevertheless, the conclusion is to focus on a negotiated deal that not only blocks Iran's re-emerging nuclear weapons potential, but that also provides them with a face-saving way out of the current crisis and war situation. This is what I actually wanted to contribute. And again, Pugwash as such is open to deepen these kind of debates with you and others, because the main mission of Pugwash is to organize dialogues across the divide. And that is complicated, but it is not useless if you really start and if the will of the warring sides are there. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Götz, for this very, I would say, sobering talk. And we need sober thinking, especially in these days. Our last speaker today is Brigadier General retired Shlomo Brom, who's also a member of Pugwash and has a long illustrious past in the Israeli army. And he will speak, the topic was written before the current war ended. Hopefully it will not renew it, but he will speak about the prospects, we sort of danger of prolonged war, but you can speak of the prospects of, I would say, armed conflict, or however you want to take your talk. So Shlomo, please.
Thank you, Meir. Unlike the previous speakers, I am not an Iran expert, and I'm not a physicist. I am a military expert and dealt a lot with war and peace in the Middle East. And naturally, it is in the context of the relationship between Israel and its Arab environment, but you cannot deal with it without dealing with Iran. So I had to deal with Iran as well. As Meir said, when we, the Israeli Pugwash group, initiated this webinar and discussed it, and I was thinking about a subject I can talk about, I thought that I should focus on the risk on the threat of a prolonged war of attrition between the two states. And I thought that I should focus on explaining why, in my opinion, it was the right moment where the interests of the two involved parties, Israel and Iran, meet, and it's their interest to stop this fighting. For Israel, it was the interest because it achieved most of its realistic military objectives in this war, vis-a-vis the Iranian nuclear program, as well as the military capabilities of Iran, and the military threats that Iran poses. And for Iran, it was the right thing to do because it was losing persistently and quite fastly very important assets in all these areas. So I was very glad when the three most important actors in these wars, and those are Iran, Israel, and of course the USA, reached the same conclusion, discussed a ceasefire and agreed to a ceasefire. But Iran violated this ceasefire early on the first day by launching several ballistic missiles at Israel. In response, Israel carried out a limited airstrike, reportedly under pressure from President Trump to give up a more drastic response. Today, 3 drones were launched aimed at hitting targets at Israel. One certainly was launched from Yemen, but according to the report of the IDF, the 2 others were probably launched from Iran. And that is a demonstration of the fragility of this ceasefire. So I want to focus on the reasons for the fragility of the ceasefire and steps that should be taken to prevent its collapse and create a more stable reality between us and Iran. First, I would argue that despite this rocky start, both sides currently appear interested in basically maintaining the ceasefire, because, as I said, of their common interest. However, the truth remains highly fragile, and the war of attrition may resume. In the framework of this kind of war, Iran may resume its launch of ballistic missiles and drones, publicly saying that they are launching them towards military targets, but actually most of these missiles are launched at Israeli cities and causing damage and casualties for the civilian population in Israel. And Israel is likely to resume airstrikes aimed at destroying remnants of the nuclear program, further disrupting Iranian launch capabilities, and deterring further aggression of Iran by raising the cost for the Iranian regime. The fragility of the ceasefire stems from 2 main factors. The first one is the risk of miscalculations or error by either side that could lead to disproportionate retaliation. And the most common miscalculation, and that is, in my opinion, what we are seeing in the last 2 days, is the idea that you can make some small provocations and there will be no reactions to that, because the other side has a small interest in retaining the ceasefire. That's, other than a simple mistake, that's the only explanation that I can give to the events of the last 2 days. This risk is heightened by the potential for attacks by Iranian proxies, which might be perceived as acts directed by Iran or done by Iran. And sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish and to know accurately whether it is launched by Iran or by one of its proxies. Imagine that one of the Iraqi militias decides to launch drones to hit targets in Israel. It is in the direction of Iran. If the drone is detected in a relatively late stage of its flight, it's very difficult to say. Did it come from Iran or did it come from Iraq? And that causes Israel to consider reactions vis-a-vis Iran. The second factor that causes the ceasefire to be fragile is the uncertainty that remains regarding the aftermath of the Israeli and US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. We are all, the participants in this webinar, are dependent on open sources. We don't know exactly what kind of intelligence is available to the Israeli intelligence or the US intelligence or other friendly services. We are dependent on open sources. And we are now flooded with reports about the result of these attacks, which are completely different for each other. I think that most of these reports are either very superficial analysis or fake reports that are strongly influenced by biases and political views. Those that oppose Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump and their policies tend to certainly that's true in the social networks, but it's true also for the classical media, tend to adopt reports that it was a complete failure and it caused only damage to the interest of Israel, United States, and the West and the world in general. Those that support them are preferring a more optimistic report. And honestly, I think that neither of us, and I think that we could understand it also from Götz's presentation, we don't know really what are the results of these attacks. We can be quite certain that the infrastructure of the Iranian nuclear program that was above the ground was quite completely destroyed. But we don't know what actually happened to the installations that were deep underground, and we don't know, we don't know what happened with the more than 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. And the third thing that we don't know whether Iran was capable before the war or in the beginning of the war to hide a small number of centrifuges. I am saying a small number of centrifuges because I don't think they can hide a large number of centrifuges. My impression from this war is that both the United States and Israel had excellent intelligence on Iran in the different important areas, whether the nuclear program or the different military assets of and Revolutionary Guard assets in Iran. So I don't believe that Iran assumed that it can hide a large number of centrifuges. But if they have a small number of centrifuges, they might think that they can try to enrich enough material for one device or two devices. It will take more time, but they will do it. And my concern is that these steps will be detected, will be traced, and war will resume as a result of that. Either there will be Israeli strikes or US strikes over different targets in Iran. So what can be done? Well, there is a limit to what you can achieve through military means. Through military means, you cannot completely destroy Iran's military assets. That is why a prolonged war of attrition is possible. We can destroy a large part of its inventory of launchers and missiles and drones and so on, but there will be enough drones and missiles that will still remain, and they could arrest it with smaller salvos of missiles, maybe 1, 2, 3 every few days, but they can continue with it. The same thing is true with the nuclear program. You cannot really destroy all the elements until the last one of them, because Iran is a huge country and you can hide things that have a small signature, like a small number of centrifuges. So the only solution is a political steps that will follow the military achievements. And because of that, we all should support a resumption of the negotiations between the United States and Iran on a nuclear agreement. There are indications that these talks probably started or will start very shortly, and hopefully will lead to an agreement. Hopefully, Iran will be more flexible on some of the issues because of the cost of the resumption of this war, and a reasonably good agreement will be reached. From my point of view, the two most important elements of this of this agreement should be no end date, namely no sunset to the agreement. And the other one is a verification, a good verification agreement that will make it sure that the agreement will be kept. But that is not sufficient from my point of view, because as long as the war in Gaza continues, there will be Iran so-called proxies that will be interested in continuing harassing Israel from time to time. And some risk that it will eventually lead to a resumption of the military conflict between us and Iran will still remain. The other political step should be the end of the fighting in Gaza, which is due for quite time. There are numerous compelling reasons to end this war. It is at this stage quite senseless. It inflicts immense harm on lives of Israelis and Palestinians, and it comes with heavy cost to them without having achieved goals that can really be achieved. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shlomo, again, sobering talk. We now open, we don't have much time left, but we are open for questions from the audience. If anyone has questions, please write them, and Eyal will collect them and he will read them aloud to each specific speaker or to other speakers. If there are no questions from the audience, then if some of the speakers want to comment on other speakers, you're welcome. But again, first let's allow people from the audience to have their share if they want anything, if they want to raise questions. Maybe until some questions are collected, if there's any one of the speakers who want to comment on other speakers, please.
Meir, I say a word about these expectations in Israel that the young people of Iran start marching and overthrowing the regime. We are expecting them too much because you expect them to identify with invaders of their country. Because I've mentioned how nationalistic they are. I think it takes time. It cannot be during a war you start moving and raising the flag that is raised by Israel or the United States. You also expect them to raise against Iranian nuclear program. Basically, when we heard from Professor Chorev and Professor Meir, that this is a consensus in Iran. And we know from the Iranian, even opposition in diaspora, they think that Iran has legitimate right, but not to get to the military level. So in this condition, it's very difficult to expect them right now to take the step.
Meir?
Yes, please.
With your permission, I think that we are concentrating on the nuclear issue, and as was there with the JCPOA, they neglected the ballistic missile. And once the ballistic missile range, collateral damage, accuracy is improved, I think that we had a demonstration how it affects the population. And I think that once going to some kind of agreement, we should deal with this issue. The current situation was better than if we had to fight Iran with the Hezbollah, with its missiles, in the time that it had thousands of missiles, and also other proxies. So not neglecting the delivery system, not only for the delivery system for the nuclear warhead, but also for the damage that they can create for population.
Thank you very much. Any? Yes, please.
I understand that argument, because ballistic missiles are raining over the heads of Israelis. It's totally legitimate to demand for a solution, but we should not underestimate that this becomes a monumental threat if a ballistic missile is fused with a nuclear weapon. So at that time, 2015, it was, I think, correct to focus on NPT, on safeguards, on the additional protocol, on inspections. And I had the impression that the Iran follows that track, and that those who wanted to destabilize JCPOA at that time also used very often the argument by pointing solely on ballistic missiles. I remember when we had the debate about WMD-free zone in the Middle East, we, from a German project, also made many proposals on restricting and even eliminating ballistic missiles, but there was not any state, including Israel, really open to have a separate agreement on restricting or focusing on only ballistic missiles. So I agree. I mean, a deal between Iran and the Israel and the United States should include this. But let me remind you that Mr. Trump was not only derailing JCPOA, but also the INF Treaty. So I think in that US administration, I don't see voices which are even capable to understand the limiting measures of arms control treaties. So, I mean, I agree, but if that is the problem, then I think we need also louder voices in your government and also in civil society to focus on it. So I would sign this, and I worked for a very long time on missile defense and on missile threats, but again, there was not much appetite in any states really to limit that. So that would really a new effort. The arms control history has a huge toolbox, including verification of eliminating and at least also of restricting ranges, payloads, and all that kind of stuff. But I think then we need really an effort. I mean, I think Pugwash would not have a problem to, I mean, Pugwash International now, where the Israeli Pugwash group is a part of it, with some 2 members in the council, to organize a workshop in Israel if there's a real interest in also limiting ballistic missiles. But as such, it is not easy to do, and we failed also in the past to do that. So I mean, this is my experience. I mean, this experience and also your experiences, Mr. Chorev, should help to put together a critical mass of people to start talking about it. But under the current situation where you still have to fear that ballistic missiles are targeted to you, it is very hard, at least, to find a robust and working solution for it. But in principle, I agree. But maybe we are all a little bit late with these kind of proposals.
Thank you very much. Not a very happy note, I should say. If there are no questions from the audience, then
yeah,
there
there
is?
is one. I see
Okay,
there's
good.
one question in the Q&A. The question is not aimed at a specific speaker, so any of you can take it. But has Israel worsened the struggle by provoking Iran? And wouldn't like it increase Iran's intentions on taking revenge in the future? So it's open for any of you to answer.
Okay, Shlomo, you want to take the challenge?
Well, I prepared for this question. So, and my answer is simple. We don't know. We don't know because we don't know what the situation was. Because the same way as we have completely different reports on what were the achievements in the airstrikes of the nuclear program, we have also contradicting reports of what was the Iranian policy prior to the Israeli decision to start this war. The Israeli government argues that that was because Iran was taking concrete steps towards weaponization of the nuclear program. And in my opinion, it might be true. I would recommend you to read the report, which is so far the best report that I read about the results of the attacks, and that a report that was published in the website of ISIS, David Albright's Institute, and it was written by him and a co-writer. And in the report, you have also the descriptions of the targets. Some of the targets are targets that were engaged actually in the weaponization of the nuclear program. How much, I don't know. We are not, we don't have the intelligence that is available to the governments. So it's quite probable that there was a reasonable, that it was a reasonable Israeli action. I think it's possible. I am not sure because I don't have the information.
Thank you very much. We have, for this answer, we have run out of time. Before we depart, let me just end with two things. One is to thank all the people who were involved in organizing this webinar, Pugwash, the Alliance Center, and especially three young people who were very helpful behind the scenes. Shira Cohen, Liam Sadovsky, and Eyal Brusilovsky, who have been very, very helpful. Without them, it would not have been possible. Thank you, all the participants. We'll have another session tomorrow, which will start at the same hour, and hopefully will also produce a very interesting and fruitful discussion as we had today. And let's hope for better times for everyone in the Middle East, we should say the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.